Welcome back, everyone. I'm Winter, and I'm here with a Direct Strike Beginner's Guide. Now, this is not necessarily a guide to tell you how to win. It's a guide to get you in and figure out all these things that are going on, and hopefully you don't have random people on the internet yelling at you, but that's a bit optimistic. Direct Strike is the most popular arcade game in Starcraft 2. It is completely free to play, at least the two modes that are played by the vast majority of people. Though it does have a $5 premium mode that has skins and some additional mod modes that you can host with your friend. But I'm playing standard mode, which is essentially your StarCraft 2 versus units, all the ones in standard multiplayer with the current patch. They're updated with the current patch. And nothing else. You got your basic units, your basic upgrades. But the way it plays out is a little bit different. It's a tug-of-war style game. It's standardly 3v3. I actually just used the auto-join option. I have no idea who these people are, so they'll probably yell at me at some point. But that's okay. With 3v3, that doesn't mean all the armies are necessarily fighting at the same time. Each player will spawn a wave every 60 seconds, depending on what slot they were in the lobby. Like, for example, I was third slot, so I will be the third wave to spawn. And essentially, you're up against the player on the other side in the same spot. There are some significant differences from multiplayer you gotta understand. Well, the biggest one is the way that income works. Income in Direct Strike is a set amount. You start with 7.5 minerals per second. There are a couple ways to increase this. One is to take additional extractors on these mineral patches, but those are expensive and take some time to pay off. In standard mode, usually you don't want to take those, as opposed to focusing on taking control of the center line, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start out. There are plenty of builds and tactics and all that, but I'm going to start out with Marines and Marauders. A classic, right? And, well, we lost a teammate. That will happen sometimes. That means my wave and my teammate's wave will spawn faster. The game is not nearly over. The advantage the other team now has is that there's only 2 waves to counter instead of 3. Not a big deal. But if we build strongly enough and we are smart enough, in fact, it might even be better to be playing 2v3. So starting out, it's going to be a little harder to manage what I'm up against, so I'm just going to focus on getting a good standard army that beats everything. So, the other form of income I was talking about is the center line. The center line gives you plus 1 income per second, whereas each extractor or gas geyser gives you 0.5, and that's to the whole team. When you control the center line by having no enemy units contesting it and walking past it, like we do now, you see the blue, that means we get plus 1 income, which is the same as 2 extractors, but for free. It costs nothing. I'm going to get my stim here to start. It costs nothing except the units you have to build in order to control it. So this is why a lot of players, my teammate took gas early on, which if I was someone else, I would yell at him for, but we're just playing a random game with random people. Oh, okay, I need to recognize this. He rushed lurkers. But that means the other team has overall more income right now, but over time, you get more income from the extractors. A third way to get income is to kill the defensive structure, which in this case is our bunker, which they are killing. And that gives you a one-time bonus of minerals and makes it easier to maintain the center. I'm going to get combat shields and concussive shells from the upgrades tab. But your general rule, it's just like regular StarCraft, where just because what you're building right now isn't countering your opponent doesn't necessarily mean those are the wrong units. Like, I trust in Marines and Marauders, and I'm building them on the center line, so usually just building them on the center line isn't a bad call with ranged units if you don't know what you're up against. If you really want to catch up with your teammate's wave, you build near the front, because they spawn at the front. If you want to just hold back so your teammates can catch up to you, you build near the back. But I'm kind of literally in the middle ground right now, so. Those are hallucinated Archons, but since I don't have Tier 2, we'll be talking about that in a second. The next thing to think about, because I only have access to Marines, Marauders, and Reapers, and your Tier 1 tech, your basic tech units, is when you get Tier 2. Now, rushing it is what my teammate did. So he could get lurkers, he's got his variety pack of Zerg here, which is an interesting call. Whereas, I think my best call will be to just try to overwhelm on the ground while my teammate has all these high-tech units. If I can do that, then his units can actually push through. Yeah, there's a... If we can get the cannon, I will take my gas geyser and get tier 2. I'm actually going to get +1 infantry weapons, and just like in Versus, the weapon upgrades, weapon, armor, shield, all those upgrades are very similar to standard StarCraft, where weapons are really good for bio because all those units fire fast. Armor isn't as much of a priority because they don't take many hits usually, and I'm up against a lot of units that hit hard anyways, so getting more armor won't necessarily reduce that much either way. But as time goes on, you got to try to figure out what are your opponents spending on. Click on their units, look for upgrades, like 1-1 here. He also has the Resonating Glaives upgrade for the Adepts, so he's really focused on Adepts. The things you want to look for are later game units and whether they're investing in upgrades, as well as obviously what units. Like the Terran here, by far has the highest tech. He has +1, he's got 2 Liberators, which I'm struggling to deal with, and he has a Raven. So he spent the most money on tech, whereas the Protosses are still on a lower tech level. So right now, oh, we see a Void Ray. Alright, that will trigger me getting to... The reason you don't just get tier 2, it's 250 minerals. That's... While the unit costs are slightly different, Marine isn't. And everything costs minerals, there's no Vespene gas, it just gets translated. Marauders are pretty cheap for the cost as well, is another example. 250 minerals is a significant amount of money, and it takes some time, so. But right now, I'm just sticking with the classics. We got Marines, Marauders, and that's it. And I'm going to add some more units that start with them. We're going to add 2 or 3 medevacs. Actually, if your opponent Zerg especially, or Terran, like my opponent, my teammate is Zerg. All his units are biological, which means my medevacs, even if they don't, even if all my units die, if they survive, they will heal my teammate's wave. So I'm going to get the +2 infantry weapons as well. My objective is to actually, until my opponents get splash damage, I'm probably going to stick on these bio units, because against players who don't have real splash damage, bio units are some of the most cost effective in the game. And once again, this holds very true for Direct Strike as well. Standard mode is very similar in the unit compositions to what you'd see in Versus, which is why I like it. I'm actually going to get the +1 armor here. I know, like, the Terran focus so much on going for tech, and the Protoss so little, that it creates kind of a weird imbalance here, where I was able to counter the Protoss, and the Terran just doesn't have enough to support them. We're not quite able to break through, but... No, Marauder. Well, yeah, okay, he's right, but... if we just continue pushing with this, now, if they hold a little bit longer, I don't want to keep just building the same thing. I want to make sure that I recognize they can push back, because they can create a lot of momentum if they just keep pushing back. It's a very boomerang roller coaster type game. So you got to be careful you don't just focus too much on units that aren't necessarily going to be winning it for you. Like, my next thought would be Liberators for me, because we have decent air control. The Terran has a lot of anti-air, but not enough to take out Liberators in a timely manner. I could also think about Vikings as well. Usually with these things, I want to come out with 2 or 3 at a time, not just get 1. Also, I should have taken another gas. I didn't talk about that. Taking another extractor is common when you kill the enemy's defensive structure. I should have done that a while ago. I'm going to add a couple Liberators in. I should have them in time. After a while, you kind of get a feel for how much income you're going to have. Liberators cost 215 minerals. And once again, you kind of eventually realize how much money you're going to need. The Liberator range upgrade is good, but it forces you to go to Tier 3, which is 450 minerals. So that's pretty costly. So they have a DT. I don't have a Raven, but once you get Tier 2, you can scan every 21 seconds for 25 minerals. So ideally, you have detection. But if you don't, you still have options for it. The scan can also be used to scout what your opponent is building and how much gas they have, aka how much income. But usually it's better to just save it for detection and not waste your minerals. The Terran has tanks. I'm actually going to go Liberator range. Here. If we can get rid of the tanks and work on air control as well as get more gas. The problem is, I think they have just enough. The Protoss has invested in upgrades here. I think they have just enough. They're going to hold us. So I need to just get better tech. The Bio Army is going to get less and less effective as more tanks come out, as more Archons come out. But ranged Liberators are quite good in that scenario. So getting a second gas. I'll get the +3 weapons upgrade. But yeah. Here, stacking up siege units like ranged Liberators and siege tanks, and even lurkers, but mostly the first two. Your ultimate endgame units for each race. I know I'm just playing Terran now. I'm just going over mostly the basics. This is mostly just for the basics. Maybe I'll do something for a Protoss and Zerg, but things like Tempest and Templar, Infestors and Broodlords, you've heard these names before. So, those are the things you focus on later on. Splash damage, especially like if we got pushed, we'd want to get some splash damage to kind of compound the fact that the further away they are, the harder it is for waves to stack up, whereas it helps us, the defender's advantage. We have the advantage of the center line giving us more income, but they have the advantage of being closer to their spawn. I got the +3 attack. Another very important part, I should have covered this early, is if you right-click something, it will automatically buy it when you have the minerals. Like, I right-clicked Advanced Ballistics for Liberators, Liberator range, and then as soon as I get it, that's very important for upgrades. You can't do it for units, but you can do it for upgrades, and they're very key upgrades. Because you might get distracted, or maybe actually even be microing with the ability control menu, which I won't go into because there's really nothing I need to worry about on that now. I'm just going to get enough Vikings to make sure that my Liberators don't just die. But my teammate has Corruptors. Eventually, now, a very important thing. You have to recognize which units it's important to have upgrades for now. Like, I'm not getting ship weapons or armor, because I only have a handful of Liberators and Vikings. But Liberator range increases their effectiveness significantly. So even if I only have 3 Liberators, Liberator range is worth it, but ship weapons is not. So that makes the difference. We were able to push through with the late game units, and eventually take down the base. Despite being 2v3. In fact, that might have helped us. My teammate seemed like he had a good idea of what he was doing. But you got the stats there. Some important things to look at. Just get an idea of how long people own mid. You can see who was really tanking the damage and who was dealing it. Like, for example, the Protoss tanked 43,000 damage. What was he doing? He had a lot of charge lots, so it was just a lot of units holding on to it. You can just close, well, first resources, minerals spent, refineries built. This is part of the reason I feel like they lost, is this guy went for 4 gases. 2 of them have not paid off yet. In fact, in the menu, when you're clicking on the gas, you can see how long it'll take to pay off. So if you are pretty sure the game's going to go 10 more minutes, maybe get that 3rd gas. Or longer than 10 more minutes. Whereas, like, for example, my gas ain't even paid off yet. I was just that far ahead. So I hope you like the basic breakdown of Direct Strike. I hope this is a little helpful. Makes it a little less confusing. It's a lot of fun. It's probably my favorite arcade game, and many other people's. And, make sure to like and subscribe, or the link gets out. Ring the bell. Tell your friends. Say you were first. Tell me how I'm bad at Direct Strike. All important things. Your valuable feedback keeps me awake at night. Actually, that's technically true because I stream it.